This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good looking friends. I have to ask this question: why is Hollywood so disconnected from the rest of the world? So, Harry and Meghan have bought another award, and this time around, it's for some Living Legends Aviation Bullshit Award being given to Harry. Perhaps maybe this is a way for Harry to clap back for being excluded from the Sandhurst, I guess, top 200 notable alumni. So this loser is now getting an award for some type of flight accomplishment, which we all know is a joke. But I just want to point something out. They continue to harp on using the veterans as their platform. At least that's their last hope that I see. But we keep forgetting to bring to the front that Harry has been here trying to undermine our Constitution and the First Amendment. And that is a direct slap in the face of these veterans. So I can't understand why the veteran community continues to allow this douchebag to continue to grift off of them and exploit them for his own personal PR improvement. Answer me that. Hopefully, many of you have seen this video that I did about Safiya Noble and her involvement with the Aspen Institute as well as the censorship industrial complex. I also want to focus now on another person who participated in this event, and his name is Rashad Robinson. It is really important we understand what is going on here and the alignment that Meghan and Harry have had that influenced and interfered with our elections and continuing to do so with our elections. Now, Rashad is the CEO or president of this nonprofit called Color of Change, but we'll get into that in a second. But let me jog your memory. He was also a participant of the Wire interview that happened with Renee DiResta, in where Harry professed and said publicly that he knew about January 6th.
Prior to January the 6th, where I warned him that his platform was allowing a coup to be staged. That email was sent the day before, and then it happened, and I haven't heard from him since.
So, a couple of fun facts about Rashad Robinson. He is the president of this nonprofit called Color of Change. And I'll get into a little bit later on in this video about the actual nonprofit itself and the grift of Meghan and Harry with this company, but also was a commissioner on the Aspen Institute and heavily contributed to that information disorder report that has now been affecting policies all around the world. Let me give you a small taste of his mindset in this Stanford panel.
One of the sort of big findings that we came out with Aspen, which is how much we need leadership and how much this issue sort of lacks leadership, and not just leadership in government, which is incredibly important for all the reasons that Nicole said. And some of what Nicole said was sort of in the report around sort of what does it mean to have sort of coordinated leadership from the top, leadership that sort of wraps around various agencies, but leadership in the private sector, leadership among institutions that give accreditation. That are medical institutions or legal institutions, and how are they removing, and of course, leadership within the platforms. I think one thing that is really important in all of this is, with all the things that you said, is the enforcement piece. And making sure that the enforcement is at scale of the problem. Right now, the enforcement that we have seen has been enforcement that can be written off. It doesn't actually get to the business model. And so even if you look at the Section 230 section of the Aspen report, it does look at sort of business model aspects. And what does it mean to not throw away 230, but what does it mean to deal with things that are not about speech in Section 230? The aspects about, recommendations, the ads, and all the ways in which those things sort of play into something very different. And then, a number of other things that we did with the commission that I think is both important and instructive, besides sort of these sort of recommendations to both institutions and to government, is also looking at some of these areas that we are talking about around the larger society, right? And so we did talk about what is the story of this country, and what is the truth, and how do we actually have real conversations about truth and healing and reconciliation. We had we brought up the issues of diversity, the tables that so much of this technology is created. Who's at those tables from a race and gender and experience perspective in the world, and how that then forms and shapes what people think is going to be harmful or not harmful. And I think all of that was, incredibly important to having a robust set of recommendations that taken together will help us move the problem, but recognizing that there is no one silver bullet.
What's really frustrating about these Marxists/communists, they don't fully understand what the word democracy really means. And under the guise of what they are doing as promoting democracy, they truly are pushing an agenda that has been indoctrinated and rooted in the institutions that they have been a part of. This is the huge problem that we see here. I don't doubt that this guy cares about people. I believe he does. And I do believe that he truly thinks that what he is doing is so unbiased and fair and promoting the well-being of his Black community. But what he is not seeing is how racist he is against every other community, in the sense of not thinking about how this impacts so many people and infringes upon rights and our personal sovereignty as well as our alienable rights, which is what all these people seem to not care about. What is really concerning to me is that the people that are in power, that are pulling the strings, the very same tech companies and propaganda machines, have been manipulating these people to work within these communities to get them to do what they want at the end of the day. And when they do get what they want at the end of the day, guess who's going to suffer? These very same communities that backed this stupidity. Keep in mind that this guy is talking about democracy and truth, but at the same time had supported and backed Meghan and Harry in all their lies. Even when Bot Sentinel's report came back as it being inconclusive and Twitter didn't find that this was a coordinated campaign, it didn't matter. These folks were set on a narrative because this is what they were pushing. So Rashad Robinson came out into the media condemning Twitter, saying that, oh, they refuse to see that this is really happening, not taking into effect that Meghan had been paying all these people to create this noise and optics out into the media. So the same manipulation that was going on that they're claiming is happening with Trump and these MAGA supporters is the same tactics that Meghan and Harry, Renee, Rashad, Boozy, Ellie Hall, Jack Royston, all the propagandists were doing on the flip side for this election. So when we talk about grassroots work, this is what Meghan and Harry meant, which raises and now puts into spotlight this organization, Color of Change. In my humble opinion, Color of Change also now needs to be investigated by the IRS. The whole thing is a racket. Let's begin with the amount of money that Archwell Fugazi Public Charity gave to Color of Change, which was $125,000 to do what, you may ask? Supporting to build the Black Tech Agenda program. Doesn't that sound pretty vague and also extremely racist? If I didn't know any better, this looks like $125,000 to mobilize and get Sussex Squad Sugars to go out and put pressure on so-called people's necks, as they so say. When you look at this organization and what it actually does, Meghan and Harry, or James Holt, whoever may be responsible for putting together this IRS tax return, thought that they could manipulate and pass one over on the IRS by putting down that Color of Change tax ID, as you can see here, as a 501c3, when in actuality it's a 501c4. There's a difference, and let me explain to you what that difference is, which could get Archwell in a lot of trouble for doing this. As you can see from the tax return 2020, because there is no 2021, 2022, or 2023 filings yet, you can see that they have checked off the 501c4 box, in which it does say when you go into the schedule, bullet number 3 says, did the organization engage in direct or indirect political campaign activities on behalf of or in opposition to candidates for public office? The answer was yes. So getting back to Archwell and what this little detail actually means. for 501c3s, they must be used for charitable purposes, and no amount can be used for political activities. Well, this subdivision of Color of Change as a 501c4 is specifically dedicated to political activism. So there's no way out of that one, but also contributing to a 501c4 is not tax deductible. So what we have here is a manipulation to get tax deductions, which in actuality is 100% tax evasion. So, this reporting inaccuracy, among the others that I pointed out in the past, does give warrant for these two to be criminally charged. I'm assuming that Meghan and Harry are going to put the fault now on James Holt since he's the one who signed off on it, or maybe Shauna Knepp they might throw under the bus because she's responsible for the finances, even though she's getting paid a hell of a lot less. They're going to throw someone under the bus. Hopefully these two get exposed in Samantha's court case because not only are they evading taxes, but they're also using this not only for political purposes, which Harry has been undermining our Constitution and slapping our veterans in the face, but also using that to coordinate domestic terrorism with these Sussex squatties, which then now opens up and exposes Color of Change for what they have been doing with their political activism and why we're seeing the destruction in our society today as a result of how they operate. So now let's talk about how Color of Change operates. So, Color of Change is an online organizing organization created by the Obama administration former Green Job czar, Van Jones, and former director of grassroots mobilization for MoveOn.org, James Rucker. So, a couple of fun facts about Van Jones. So, this public image that you see may not be the reality, as he was associated or is still associated with left wing extremism. Jones admitted in 2005 that he had been a communist and rowdy nationalist, referring to his participation in 1992 Rodney King protests as a law school student. In March 2009, the Obama administration appointed Jones as his special advisor for green jobs, commonly sloganized as Green Job Czar. Roughly 6 months later, Jones resigned from his post due to revelations of his background, which was too radical to be associated with the administration. The Washington Post noted his involvement with the now defunct Bay Area radical group Standing Together to organize a revolutionary movement, which had Marxist roots, also emerged as an issue. Make no mistake, this is a left-wing extremist group. They have in the past been accused of issues around their advocacy because Color of Change has ran a large number of campaigns to weaken state-level law enforcement measures. And their current criminal enforcement policy campaigns seek to end the practices of cash bail and probation. We're seeing the deterioration here in New York City with the problem with our police now, not keeping the bad people off the streets, but in fact, putting them back out into the streets once they get arrested, even though they have committed many crimes 10 times over. We're seeing a reduction in funding the police and keeping people safe here in the city. As a result of people like this who force themselves into intimidating and trying to get these prosecutors that they don't like because they're white out of office. Hear it from Rashad's mouth on how they operate. And you tell me if this is not terrorism under the guise of political activism.
And so I'm going to walk you through the animation of a campaign. And this really gets us into thinking about how we engage in elections, but also recognizing the role of uprisings, the role of people power. We are coming out of a period where a lot of videos were on air. We're inside of a period of deep social movement and social progress at the local level, particularly as it relates to criminal justice reform. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of how we move from moment to movement, and from a campaign that happened several years ago, but still has sort of legs today. And so the top picture is Anita Alvarez. And Anita Alvarez was the Cook County state's attorney or district attorney, depending on where you live. And Anita Alvarez had a history of racking up mass incarceration. She had a history of not holding police accountable. Anita Alvarez was a Democrat, or is a Democrat. And we, back in 2012, got to know Anita Alvarez because the Innocence Project called us up and we're like, we have a problem. We've got this district attorney who is ignoring DNA evidence that would exonerate 10 Black men of a crime that they confessed to as youth, but it looks like it was coerced, and DNA evidence has exonerated them, and Anita Alvarez is ignoring it because it's been years later, and the police officers that forced the confession have moved up high inside of Cook County, Chicago politics. And we launched a campaign, we mobilized our members, we sent phone calls, we showed up to her offices with petitions. We found out that Anita Alvarez wanted to be a federal judge and was lobbying President Obama to get an appointment. We raised money and ran radio ads in Cook County and in DC, urging Obama not to make her a federal judge. Within a week of those radio ads running, somehow the DNA evidence suddenly mattered and people were being released. But this is like whack-a-mole, that game at the carnival where something pops up and you hit it down and something else pops up and you hit it down. We haven't yet built the power to force this elected official to be nervous about disappointing us. The picture below is Sandra Bland. Sandra Bland may need no introduction to so many of us because her story is a story that is very much part of the Black Lives Matter story, of the Say Her Name story, of a police interaction caught on tape where the Black person did not live to tell a new story and to make a new story. She was found hanging in a Waller County jail after that interaction. She was given a $5,000 bail by the local district attorney. We mobilized our members. We hired private investigators to go down to Waller County to find out what happened. We did a whole lot of work to try to mobilize and hold elected officials accountable. And at every turn, finding the limitations of various systems to actually do what we wanted to do. This is actually, right, how politics in action can either sort of advance what you want or hold back what you want, depending on how much power you actually have. In both of these cases, we leverage digital technology to respond to the moment and mobilize people, to engage people and educate people, whether it was through hiring private investigators, whether it was through sort of petition deliveries and pressuring politicians. But what ended up happening was we did not have the right amount of power. So in 2016, we launched a political action committee, and we asked the members who were signing petitions and making phone calls to join us in doing voter contact. And we picked 7 district attorney races around the country. And we brought people into these settings of what we were calling textathons, because we took the voter file and we cross-tabbed it of Black folks who don't vote regularly with the voter file, and we're able to have our members reaching out through text message to voters, educating people about district attorney races. We picked 7 races. We partnered with local communities in places like Houston, Orlando, Chicago, and had events. We increased voter turnout in all of the places we engaged in because we were reaching voters about things that they actually cared about. And in places like Chicago and Houston, where folks turned out, they also voted a ballot as well for the top of the ticket races. But people turned out and voted, and we won 6 of the 7 races that we engaged in. The very next day, folks started calling us from district attorney offices around the country. What do you guys want? What are the things that Color of Change cares about? What are your demands? And we had to start building a new level of infrastructure to start being able to channel our members' aspirations into the type of demands on district attorneys. Also working to figure out where we had power to protect people and where we had power to put new people in office.
This is why these people are so dangerous to our society. The fact that he sounds so positive and uplifting is part of the manipulation, part of the sale. But when you hear words such as force, push, pressure onto people, that is intimidation. That is injecting fear. And part of the reason why you have these district attorneys calling and saying, hey, what do you guys want? How can we appease you? Is because of the fear of backlash and the onslaught of what people would do, such as how he's describing mobilizing these people. It's borderline harassment. When you look at Meghan Markle and you see what she has done with all these various campaigns and the sugars going after and targeting anyone who criticized Meghan, you realize that this coordinated type of campaigning is not only just going on with Meghan Markle, but it's going on within our society itself to affect true, case in point, real change that is destructive and harmful to society, as we're witnessing here. I'm witnessing it here in New York City. I mean, say what you want about Trump. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but what is going on to him with all these prosecutions by the people that have elected Alvin Briggs, Letitia James, those that have a clear agenda to ensure that this man doesn't get to run, shows how corrupt the system is. And I'd like to put it out there that George Soros has his hand in all of this mess as to why it's happening. And the hypocrisy is real with this organization. So it has been said that Color of Change's executive director said that neither Color of Change nor Color of Change PAC takes money from big corporations. However, the Washington Times reported that liberal billionaire George Soros gave $500,000 to Color of Change in 2015. So, they can say that, oh, we are trying to force these corporations to go in this direction, but at the same time, they're taking dark money in order to appease whatever agenda that is happening and what we're seeing right now. This is a complete destruction of our society, and these idiots are going along with the plan because one, they're being incented to do it, and two, they actually think that they're doing good for the people, but they're hurting us more. So, of course, Rashad is going to be the good little soldier and do what the white man tells him to do by suckering the black community into this garbage. As you can see here, he's getting paid $500,000 for 20 hours of work, while the rest of the team getting paid much less than that and working twice as much. Explain to me how this is helping with equality. And what's crazy to me is that this guy has the nerve to issue a statement yesterday about the Republicans cutting $10 billion to the IRS mandatory funding. The mandatory funding that they're cutting is for the 87,000 IRS new hires that they put on board that aren't doing their fucking job. Seriously, they can use racism for just about anything. And here they say the GOP continues to undermine the IRS. It comes as no surprise that Republicans are pushing to cut funding for a modern IRS, hindering vital upgrades like improving taxpayer services and technology and speeding up tax return processing. This move also undermines efforts to address racial audit disparities, focusing on wealthy tax cheats, and obstructs the goal of providing free tax filing for middle and lower income communities burdened by fees for profit companies. Properly funding the IRS will allow for more underwriters and greater expansion, making the services the IRS provides more equitable for everyone. While the GOP is on the side of wealthy tax cheats and predatory tax companies like Intuit, H&R Blocks, and TaxSlayer, who only intend to exploit those at the lowest income threshold, we are fighting for a more equitable system for all Americans. At this point, we shouldn't be spending anything because we're $34 trillion in debt. And I don't think he gets that or understands it. Sure, we want equity and fairness all around, but we have some serious problems going on right now that everything is taking a backseat. It's not about being racially motivated against people of certain communities and being mad that there are companies out there like H&R Block and Intuit who have been in the business of helping people get their taxes together. So maybe put pressure on those companies to give free services to the lower income classes in order to help the situation. Obviously, this press release was done for political purposes to help the Democrats because they are deathly afraid of what is coming up in 2024. And at this point, they're going to throw everything and blame the Republicans for everything because, this is the election year. The ignorance and arrogance of this press release is astounding. Continue to keep blaming the Republicans when they say nothing about all the money that disappeared from the taxpayer over to the Ukraine region, when we know and we see that our money was being laundered and going back into the pockets of the Democrats. So I think right now all of this falls on deaf ears, in my opinion. As a result of all this positive change that organizations like this have caused, New York City is fast tracking on its way to becoming a third world city. As you can see here, filmed right outside my window in broad daylight in the heart of Times Square, are migrants knife fighting. Now, this is just a common thing that happens because all of them have been carrying weapons. I am going to tell you this right now. Keep voting Democrat, and this is going to get worse. I don't care if Trump is a misogynist or a racist. Under his watch, this shit didn't happen in New York City. Now I'm seeing it at my front door, and I'm sorry, I don't want to live this way. The administration currently right now is doing nothing to stop it. This should be an eye-opener that all of this that's happening is intentional by the Democratic Party. This is all to be securing the election. And I know you hear the sirens going off, but this is what happens more frequently because they're now responding to a fight that just happened outside. I'm not making this up, guys. For those that may not know, apparently in many states, no proof of citizenship is required for federal elections. How convenient.
I would just like to know what you can say to reassure us that this election will not be rigged or stolen.
Well,
a few moments later.
so I want to be honest. It's not as if it's just Republicans who have monkeyed around with elections in the past. Sometimes Democrats have too. Whenever people are in power, they have this tendency to try to, tilt things in their direction.
As I look into this deeper, it does appear to me that the Obamas have had a heavy influence into a lot of things that we have seen Meghan and Harry do, as well as the organizations that they have aligned with, as far as the same language being used and as far as the same ideology and thought process. To me, it's now appearing that there could be some orchestration happening from behind the scenes to continue to keep this power with Democratic Party.
All of us in leadership have to find ways in which we can recreate a common space on the internet, because it used to be in the United States, at least, for example, we had 3 television stations and everybody watched Walter Cronkite or David Brinkley or whoever the chief anchor was. Everybody had a common set of facts. And so there might be conservatives and liberals, but people generally could agree on a baseline of reality. Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about disinformation and democracy, the focus of the overall event, democracy is predicated on the belief in our country that we may disagree on policies or solutions, but we are going to approach a shared set of problems with a shared base of facts, a shared base of information, and a shared epistemology. One of the things that we've seen in the last 10 years is a transformation of the information environment. We now have social media, which is a channel in a broader media ecosystem that also includes broadcast media like radio and television. But because of the newness of social media, we have tended to focus on what specific factors social media has wrought, the way in which it has transformed the conversation. Colleagues of mine at Stanford, including Nate, have written some really excellent kind of diagnoses on this. The phenomenon of velocity, information moving much faster, the phenomenon of virality, in which people are active participants in creating and spreading information. We've seen a fragmentation of the information environment in which social media has enabled a number of what we might call media of one, sort of small niche publications that speak to very targeted, tailored audiences. And the interesting phenomenon there is that rather than everyone seeing the same 5 channels or even the same broadcast channels, we have have the ability to pick and choose what content we want to engage with. We have the rise of the influencer. What does it mean when any individual person who just puts themselves out there as themselves amasses followers that traditionally were commensurate with mass media, hundreds of thousands of followers, and the information, the way that it cascades across networks of connected individuals, all of us, as we choose what we are going to share, what we're going to amplify, what we're going to spread. So we have an interesting phenomenon of a transformation of the information environment, profound agency on the part of the ordinary person, the user, to decide what they're going to share, and unexpected at times intersections with algorithms.
Of clearly moving forward from analysis into action after so many decades of talk, of conversation, which is of course one place where it needs to start, but actually acting. And again, with the Black Lives Matter, it's a movement.
I talk a lot about sort of not just telling stories that are unfortunate, where we see inequality, poverty, racism, sexism as unfortunate, almost like it's a car accident, but we tell stories that are unjust. And we focus not on the fact that it just happened, but we work to recognize that the problems and the challenges we are facing in our society are manufactured. The thing is if that we tell stories that make it seem like it's just a car accident, then we end up with charitable solutions to structural and systemic problems.
So we have to go to the root of the problem, to the source of the problem, and actually fix it there. And as we've discussed before, it's going to take every single one of us. This is not down to the Black community. This is down to every single person that is on the planet right now, especially, well, not especially, but certainly seemingly to be led by the younger generation. This movement is anyway, and to be able to act.
We're going to succeed. But young people, I think, recognize that through the internet and through social media and other tools, they may be able to mobilize themselves to actually get something done. And the question is, can we encourage that process rather than just wave it off as a pipe dream?
Yeah. Well, you managed to get people to use technology to take real action when you were elected.
Here's the thing, and what it all boils down to is that this has been one massive psychological mind meld by the very same people who want to protect us from all these harms. See this photo here? This is Tristan Harris, Meghan's bestie, in The Social Dilemma, in which they openly admit that their job is to use psychology against us. And what I think is so dangerous about it is that they are literally the puppet masters of controlling what we learn, what we do, how we behave, all by using these platforms. My suggestion, I'm not on Twitter or I don't actively engage in it, nor am I on Facebook. I think a lot of people really need to start evaluating, are these places really safe to be on, and just come off of it. I think Facebook is the most dangerous social media platform of them all. My suggestion would be to come off of it because they can't survive without people. The other manipulation that we have going on here is with this ideology, it warps the truth. And as you can see, this lawyer, which I was shocked to hear him define what misinformation, disinformation is versus what truth is. And here is what he said. And I think that if we continue to make this acceptable, then people who lie like Meghan Markle will obviously always get away with it. And these people should be held accountable. Just my opinion.
So I agree with the basic framework of the definitions. I think that makes all the sense in the world as a way to approach it. But then things get a little bit difficult. You mentioned, Renee, in your excellent lead up to this, the definition of disinformation. And of course, the problem is that one person's disinformation is another person's truth. I see that awfully regularly looking at the elections area, which is basically my expertise. And there's no greater example than the 2020 election to show the problems of coming up with actually a workable definition of disinformation. And just to put another frame on it a bit, I think one of the big problems that we have is that the people who disagree the most on the truth of the election aren't talking to each other at all. So part of dealing with this definitional problem and then how to attack the problem is recognizing how split we are and how little actual content there is between the 34% of the people who don't believe the election results and everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I really do appreciate us trying to come to a frame, and I think, you know, what I would add here is power and profit. Because I think you can't talk about, what do you say, velocity, volume, and scale without talking about the incentive structures inside of a capitalist society of people actually making money, and then when we come up with solutions or have solutions, how they can be problematized in the frame of whether or not they're going to make someone more money or less money. And I think as it relates to power and relates to disinformation, we can track all the lies that have been told about various communities since the beginning of this country that have been rooted in both driving profit and about building power, and who gets to control the levers of what becomes truth and what gets to travel ends up having so much impact. And I think as we are in this space where more and more people want to figure out how to deal with information disorder, how to deal with mis and disinformation, I don't think that we can think about things like polarization or consensus without thinking about as long as polarization is profitable, it will continue to exist. And when we ask ourselves questions about consensus, we have to ask ourselves consensus around what and for who? And does that consensus mean that it stands in the way of justice? It stands in the way of what's right. It stands in the way of human dignity, because consensus time and time again has oftentimes been a tool to suppress the opportunities, the rights, and the freedoms of so many.
I think Rashad is a very smart man and he gets it. The only thing that I am concerned with is, has he been manipulated and indoctrinated into this thought process the same way Safiya Noble is? I don't think that these people are malicious people. I do think, though, that the way that they see things is kind of warped. And they could honestly say the same thing about me, you know, giving this flip side of it. What I don't see is the output of positivity in which racial, you know, tensions have increased, as well as inequality has gotten bigger. So what are they doing that is actually making things better for the world? It does appear to me that things are getting worse. Clearly, as you're seeing what's happening outside my window here in New York City, you know, society is on a decline at the moment. And, you know, you can't blame Trump anymore because we're now going into our fourth year with this administration and the country has flipped upside down. We're in more wars. People are going hungry. People are struggling to make ends meet. Inflation is up. I mean, there's so many problems. And none of the current politicians, as well as the so-called influencers, want to take any accountability for this mess, but instead blame it on climate change. So, you know, this is where we're at, guys. This is what the de facto answer is going to be for everything, because these politicians are running out of excuses. As you can see, Harry and Meghan definitely served their purpose and what they were doing. And now that it's all coming out, you can see how things have started to change a little bit, meaning the Sussex Squad sort of disappearing. And you can also see how everyone is connected and what they were connected to. It's why I have been so exasperated by screaming at the top of my lungs of Harry interfering with our government. This man should not be on U.S. soil anymore. In fact, he should be hauled to jail. Not only because he funded and supported a global terrorist group called the Sussex Squad, he also had his hand in interfering with our constitutional rights and undermining our government by doing the things that he had been doing with the censorship industrial complex. But what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. Everything to me is related, and why Samantha's case needs to move forward so it can all come out, because this needs to be exposed. That's all I have for you. I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I will talk to you later. Bye.
It was such a fraud.